For a few seconds, this place was Armageddon. There was a firefight!
Today we are ranking the albums from Bleeding Through, starting with Dust to Ashes in 2001. Now, like so many metalcore bands of this era, the debut is a little bit rough, bordering on demo quality, which I think is why I so often forget that it even exists. I think the opener is the perfect encapsulation of this, as it's an earlier version of Turns Cold to the Touch, and I just feel like the version on the next album is superior in every possible way. Here, Brandon's vocals are pretty weak, and the mix is just all over the place. Same goes for all the other tracks like Ill Part 2 and Just Another Pretty Face that got a new paint job in the future. I see those people in the comments on this album calling it their best, and to me it's kind of an insult to just how much better they got from here. I will say that the guitar work is already pretty much on point, and the Fight Club sample is a nice touch, so I'm gonna put this one at good tier. But moving on, we have Portrait of the Goddess in 2002. Now, this is what I consider to be the true debut of this band, with the songwriting significantly stepping up and all of the elements falling into place. It's the beginning of them writing some truly anthemic bangers ripe for scream-alongs and gym sessions, with some of my favorites to this day in the likes of Rise, Our Enemies, Turns Cold to the Touch, and the title track. Also dig that bass rumble on Wake of Orion. Love everything here, from the riffs to the vocals to the black metal inspired synth atmospheres. It's still a little rough and even downright sloppy at times with some of the vocals here and there, but in this case I think it adds to its charm, and I've just been listening to this one for a very long time, so I'm a little bit biased. But for me, it's at fantastic, and as always, you can share your own rankings down below. This is just my personal opinion. But moving on, a big one here in This Is Love, This Is Murderous in 2003. Now, for myself and probably many others out there, this was the first album from the band that you listened to, thanks in large parts to coming across opening track Love Lost in a Hail of Gunfire, which continues to be their biggest song to this day. It's just such a perfect 2000s metalcore track, from that opening Boondock Saints sample with Willem Dafoe to the incredible riffing, and then there's also On Wings of Lead, Number 7 with a Bullet, and Murder by Numbers, to name just a few standouts with insanely anthemic and memorable moments. This takes the framework of the previous record, but once more steps up the production and songwriting, and then longtime member Marta stepping in on keys, and you can hear the increased support from, at the time, very popular metalcore label Trustkill. There's even some borderline death metal moments on this one, like Shadow Walker, which is another fantastically redone track from Dust to Ashes. Definitely among my favorites, and a game-changing album for me back in high school. Easily in my top 20 most important metalcore albums of all time. It is going to perfection. Unfortunately, they followed that up with The Truth in 2006.
Disappointed!
Now, after the high bar set by that last album, this ended up being one of the most disappointing metalcore albums of all time for me. Whereas the band's admittedly already inherent cheesiness got a pass from me on previous albums due to just going so hard, this one tips over into a more melodic and kind of corporate assembly line territory.
If I told you the truth now, would you still take my heart?
The result was just pure cringe as far as I was concerned right from the top, with the nasally, lame singing of For Love and Failing, as well as others like Love in Slow Motion, and especially the awful Line in the Sand, which is the clip that I just played a second ago. A few tracks are still decent: Confession, The Painkiller, She's Gone, and Hollywood Prison, but yeah, overall this is easily my least favorite of their entire discography by quite a bit. It's going to okay. They followed that up with Declaration in 2008. Now, because of how much I lost faith in them after that last album, I actually stopped paying attention to them entirely for many years, so it wasn't until many years later that I circled back to realize that they rallied hard with this album just 2 years later. Back to the gym fuel I was looking for, and frankly heavier and tighter than ever, arguably even more bangers here in the likes of Declaration, Orange County Blonde and Blue, There Was a Flood, French Inquisition, and Germany. So many amazing scream-along lyrics from Brandon, start to finish rager that's also a bit of a tribute to touring life, with each track referencing a different place that they played live. It also marks the end of their relationship with Trustkill, which is something that was souring with a lot of bands around this time, to the point of encouraging fans to steal this album. I'd say this is actually better than This Is Love, This Is Murderous overall, and that's hard for me to say honestly, because I've listened to This Is Love way more times, but I think this one is just tighter, stronger, more concise, so it's also going to perfection. They followed that up with Bleeding Through in 2010. This was released through Rise Records in the US. Plenty to enjoy on this album as well, following up in a largely similar vein as the last one. Lots of recommendations here in Anti-Hero, Your Abandonment, Breathing in the Wrath, Salvation Never Found, and Drag Me to the Ocean.
Nothing is over. You just can't turn it off.
I'm not as big a fan of the production, and something about the songwriting here fails to get its hooks in me to quite the same level as the last one, though after years of listening, I still haven't been able to really put my finger on what that missing X factor is, but even so, very strong listen overall. It just barely misses the level of my favorites, I would say, so it's going to great tier. And that brings us to The Great Fire in 2012. The final album from their original run, and it's a doozy of a note to end on. More killer hooks and insane rhythms that really get under my skin, and I think that this is perhaps Marta's finest hour, with the synths and simulated organ rising to near Dimmu Borgir level at times. See Goodbye to Death or Walking Dead and you'll know what I mean.
Growing stronger with the distance. Now you're alone.
Other favorites here include Starving Vultures, The Devil and Self-Doubt, and Closer Back to Life. Everyone is in top form here and giving their all. There are a few moments I'm not as fond of with some of the clean vocals, but overall another incredible album, and one that I feel gets overlooked at times in discussion. Sometimes I make an argue for putting it at perfection, honestly, but I'm going to put it at fantastic. And they would go on to initially disband in 2014, only to reform a few years later, which brings us to Love Will Kill All in 2018. Now, after 6 years since the last album, I was kind of hyped for this one. I didn't have high expectations for another instant classic, but I was excited nonetheless. And I'd say that overall I got what I predicted. An overall enjoyable time that tickled my nostalgia while rarely rising to the levels of my favorites. I think the biggest issue I have with this one is the increased use of clean singing from Brandon, especially in the first half. He's fine, but I've always just preferred this in smaller doses for maximum effect. The result is that frequently I feel like I'm listening to Atreyu instead of Bleeding Through on tracks like Fade Into Ash and End Us. His performances are at least much stronger here than they were on The Truth. On the positive side though, it picks up later with some serious ragers in the likes of Cold World, Buried, Set Me Free, Slave, and especially No One From Nowhere. I wouldn't recommend this as a first introduction to the band, but I wouldn't skip over it either, especially at just 37 minutes. I'm going to put this one at good tier. It's a good time. Now, before we get to the last album, just a reminder, if you're enjoying the video, hit that like button. And again, comment below, where do you agree? Where do you disagree? This is more of a conversation than anything. I'm sharing my thoughts. There is no objective ranking to anything as far as I'm concerned. But that brings us to 9 in 2025. Now, in many ways, this album feels like a response to my criticisms of the last one, or maybe they're just really pissed off again, because this one goes way harder than it has any right to. Full aggression on opener Gallows, calling back to the heyday of their career. It has a little clean singing towards the end, but it's very eerie, and I like that. Same goes for the evil-sounding Our Brand is Chaos, and both Dead But So Alive and Path of Our Disease utilize some very effective additional vocals from Marta this time. So many good tracks here. Honestly, after the last one, I did not expect them to somehow come back sounding as hungry as they were in their 20s. But in addition to Marta's backing additions, we also get some pretty cool guest spots from God Forbid, my personal favorite Shadows Fall, and even Comeback Kid. Shockingly good stuff. Like, I was expecting it to be enjoyable, but I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. I don't know if I can give it top billing at this point, but it may very well go down as one of my favorite metalcore albums of this year. It's way too early to say that for sure, but they bring all the violence and atmosphere in equal parts that made me fall in love with them to begin with, and with a few little twists on the formula that kind of keep things fresh. So always great to see this from a band 25 years into their career. So this one is going to great tier. Y'all check out this playlist for more metalcore rankings, or this video for your personal YouTube recommendation. Consider subscribing, consider becoming a channel member to support me, or join on Patreon, early access to videos. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.